Well, thank you guys so much for clicking this video today. I really appreciate it. I've got an exciting podcast for you today. I'm actually here in person with Frederick Regard. How are you doing today, Frederick?
I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for asking.
Are you enjoying the warm, sunny Colorado?
To be honest, not so much.
Not so much?
I'm not really used to this air condition. So in Switzerland, we have 38 degrees right now, so the warm is okay. But when you walk inside, you get like refrigerated, and then you walk outside, you get toasted and then refrigerated. It's
it's not used to it. Yeah, Switzerland was beautiful. I went there for the first time last year for the last summit, and you guys did a wonderful job. You really did. There really hasn't been, a conference hosted for Cardano at that level. And it was really nice for me because I actually got to meet, Europeans. It was my first time going to Europe. So I got to meet, the European Cardano community member, and you guys did a great job. And I'm looking forward to Dubai. We're going to be getting to that shortly. So, very briefly, what is the Cardano Foundation?
Well, the Cardano Foundation is a non-profit Swiss foundation. And it's quite different than other foundations in the blockchain space because it's not been following the same path from inception to now. And secondly, the Cardano is different. So Cardano's done some, feature implementations, which is radically different from many other blockchains. And one of them, which they did, is when they did the crowdfunding of Cardano, which is done mainly in Asia, right? There was 3 rounds. 2 companies were spun up. There was In-Out Global, In-Out Hong Kong at that time, and there was in Global. And then the step later was actually the Cardano Foundation. I think one of the very interesting parts about that is, first of all, that you have a situation where it's not the foundation who owns or controls the blockchain. We don't own or control the monetary policy. We don't sit on top of a cash pile where we can just distribute all the money how I see fit or how my team see fit. But Cardano is, from inception already, decentralized in a way that we have catalysts. And we're going to, discuss whether one catalyst is better than 2, or maybe we should have for different industries and so on. But the checks and balances is very different. So the idea about the Cardano Foundation was first and foremost to have an entity who doesn't change this point of view dramatically. So what we have is we actually have personal liability, which is a little bit scary. So that means that normally when you have a company, within the laws of the country, right, you're of course liable. But with the Cardano Foundation, it goes one step further. And that means that we have a deed who basically from inception describes exactly the boundary conditions of what we do. And if we don't follow that, we are personally liable. So it's not everybody in the foundation, but it's basically the executives and the board who's personally liable towards that. So they can stay within sort of criminal law and all those things, but just because they're straying away from the original founders' ideas and principles, that basically makes you personally liable. So we actually have a supervisory authority, which is quite hard, but we have some flexibility to implement still. So that makes us quite different. The other thing is that in many blockchain foundations, it's actually a blockchain foundation who says, company X developed this blockchain, and here is money for doing that. That's not how Cardano is set up. I think that creates a lot of confusion sometimes. But actually, it's a much better setup in terms of clarity, but also in terms of accountability, and also from a regulatory perspective. As you might know, I deal a lot with regulators, and it makes me much more comfortable to talk to a regulator at that position than it was in the traditional way. Blockchain is already.
So I've noticed lately, there are a lot of Cardano community members kind of, attacking, the founding entities. And I think a lot of it is just where we're at right now, with the markets, not that we're going to go into those. And I think a lot of it is really just lack of education on the actual roles of the founding entities and what they're supposed to do long term. So to kind of clear that up, you mentioned when you started this, you guys are supposed to be this, solid foundation that doesn't really change much over time. And while I think that you've stuck to your solid foundations, you guys have changed a lot. You picked up a lot of momentum. Our last podcast, we talked about you guys were hiring developers now. So, to really, with that negativity that's out there right now, what is, the Cardano Foundation's intentions, their responsibilities, and those boundaries, that you mentioned earlier that was originally set with the creation of the foundation?
Yeah, so we have what we call a tactical implementation plan. And from a marketing perspective, I'm supposed to say it's 3 pillars. So let's start with those. So it's operational resilience, is adoption. And when you think about operation with Cylinder specifically, this is a little bit of a strange one, because we are so used to the Cardano community, right, that Cardano doesn't go down, right? It hasn't been down, right? And the heart keeps pumping, right? But these things change fast, right? And as Cardano, the code gets more and more complicated, the network stack gets more complicated, more and more features, more and more builders, right? What is really needed is you need to have the ability to have multiple entities, people, or whatever you want, clusters of people who actually takes care of network monitoring, operations, disaster recovery, and those things. And like about a year ago, we had only one. And then we had some very skilled stateful operators. But to be honest, this is very few. And it's not against stateful operators. We're talking about something which is a full-time job for stateful besides other full-time jobs. And, when we're thinking about them, we're getting up at 2 o'clock at the night because they see the transactions are slowing down for a certain part of, fiddling with the server settings and stuff like that. This is not a simple business. So what we built basically is we hired a team of site reliability engineers, and we built a network monitoring tool. We basically have allowed us already now to find, I wouldn't call it real bugs, but let's say, areas where Cardano's network protocol could be improved. And not only did we point that out, but we also actually issued code to upgrade that, which has been implemented. Now, the goal, of course, is not that we should be 2 entities and a set of stateful operators. The goal is, of course, that the stateful operators, of those who choose that to be the operating mode, that they have tooling, education, and things which makes them, able to take on the responsibility of operating Cardano every single day, because in the end, that is the role of the stateful operator. And when they go to the third pillar, which is education, which I kind of, jumped over before, right? Education was never really us who were supposed to do that. And there are sort of 3 angles to that, why we went in and created the Alpha program, and you see by the end of the year, maybe in January, we will launch what's called Module 1 and 2. But we got a lot of positive feedback on the Alpha program. I don't know if you've done this, about 7 hours training, you get a certificate and so on. But the idea here was 3 things. The first one is, when we went to universities and looked at the blockchain education there, that was based on Bitcoin and Ethereum. And don't get me wrong, I'm a large Bitcoin fan. Mm-hmm. But Bitcoin and Ethereum, to many aspects, is at best first and second generation blockchains. Cardano is a 3rd generation blockchain. That means that capital markets and cash flows is not the ultimate use case of Cardano. It is one but many. So what was really important for us is finding a way where universities, without, still staying true, could just take our slides, rebrand it in their own way, and start doing that. And by having that under like an open source license, we also achieved that the community can do the same. So we now started having, documentation in English about how blockchain works with the eyes of a 3rd generation blockchain. And that hopefully will lead to also situations that ambassadors and community makes really cool applications in Nigerian or Spanish or whatever language that might be to do quizzes and other things. But it's really about spreading that knowledge. And maybe this is a bit controversial. We're even giving that away to other blockchain projects. Why? Well, because if we can get the word out what a 3rd generation blockchain can do in an accurate format, we will have much more adoption of blockchain. I think that is how we change social systems of the world. They will then probably figure out that Cardano is quite superior in many aspects. The second thing about education was regulation. So when we spoke to the regulators, it became so abundantly clear to us that if they were up to date on blockchain, they were up to date on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and maybe one or 2 other protocols. But Cardano is significantly different. So therefore, we needed to have a way where we could say, we are not going to teach you Cardano. We go to sort of leverage the universities and some of those large consulting companies who don't have the time to write those slides, but where the regulators, policymakers, or auditors actually go to get education, that they're suddenly getting the right knowledge, which means that we can take the discussion on a different level. We don't need to start by saying, Bitcoin is this, Ethereum is this, Cardano is this, right? But we can actually dig into Cardano straight away. So there's a long time access to this, you can imagine. And last but not least, it was really about also, Cardano has some of the best feature implementation in the whole world. And we see that really starts to you start paying attention to that. So we have research, right? IoT, amazing job, right? We have specifications, IoT, amazing job, right? And then we have implementation, IoT, and hopefully some other companies coming also with Intersect and other things. But the documentation of the implementation is not that great. So by us actually sitting down and starting to write those scripts, so it's not about the delivery of education, but sitting and writing those scripts, it actually means that we're starting that journey of the description of the implementation. And that means that we can start updating Cardano docs, and we can start updating the developer portal and other places where you're looking for that kind of documentation. And that is a long journey because we need to re-engineer or take the code, the Haskell code, and pick it aside, right? And basically, figure out, okay, so this was the specification, this was the implementation. What is the differences, and what does that matter, right? Because there's been a lot of confusion around some of those things, and we even saw that people were explaining Cardano wrongly because they were explaining it based on the research and not the implementation. So that's the journey of education. And then on that journey, we also figure out that what we really need right now is we need an explorer. Now there is many amazing explorers in the Cardano ecosystem. But the reason why the foundation needed an explorer is because we needed an explorer which was meant for a regulator, a policymaker, auditor, lawmaker, right? Because we couldn't just keep going into those entities and saying, here, look at the PowerPoint. We do this differently than they did. Right? There's no trust there, right? They completely have to trust me as the delivery of messages. And there potentially blockchain has lost some of its trustworthiness in terms of the collaboration with some regulators, as you might have noticed in the media. Mm-hmm. So what we really needed to do is we needed to prove to a regulator who don't have the time to hire the computer scientist to read the Haskell code that what we said is true. So we launched the Beta Explorer with basically two things. The one thing is now live and the other thing is coming. The one thing which is live now is really not for the community. It was because we don't want to compete with the community. There's many good projects out there. Yeah. But what we needed to do is we needed to bring a user experience for our regulator that they could understand our staking cycle and that they could understand our protocol parameters. Mm-hmm. Because what you'll quickly see is that our staking cycle is at best, trying not to use these words, but it's the best words there is right now, is basically liquid non-custodial staking, which I believe you actually had a whole episode about, which is amazing, right? But now we can prove it, meaning that you can go through the Explorer, you can find a specific staking address, you can see the life cycle, and you can see that we actually have a login. But the login is for the address which is being registered to it, as you probably know, right? But there's no login to the Stakepool, and there's no slashing, there's no ownership changes. Yeah. And they can then click through that and go all the way back to the source code. So this is extremely important in our argumentation around why Cardano is different, that we can actually verify. Mm-hmm. And in Switzerland, they're actually just coming up to the conclusion right now that staking is a banking event. This might be a little boring to you, but this is actually quite important because what they've done is they looked at Ethereum, right? They said, okay, well, there is ownership change, there's a login period and slashing. This is definitely a banking event, right here. So there is sort of, so the regulator there is sort of saying, but this is what it is, right? And then we are saying, oh, hold on a second. We need to be technology specific and not agnostic. A blockchain is not just a blockchain. And this is where education again comes in, right? So this sort of educational thing has really led to many deep things. And in a certain way, that's also what we did with Atrium, where we decided to bootstrap Icon because we are on this journey of open source education. Because we fully believe that the monetary policy of Cardano is amazing, but it's very different. We cannot just print more ADA as our liking, right? So what that basically does is that when you run out of the reserves, well, then the Cardano blockchain has to be economically self-sustainable. Now, there potentially is a long way towards that, but we need to start thinking about that. And one of the ways of exiting that is open source, because with open source, what we get is we start getting contribution from the users of Cardano on the actual node and on the glue which ties the node to the application landscape. Plus, what we also get is we get more transactions, right? Because what we also get is we get a larger incentive to build on Cardano, because suddenly the people who rely on the Cardano, they can sit at the table in the technical steer code or intersect or wherever that might be. So this is of course not something where all crypto is really interested in, because this is like a 5-10 year journey, right? But it goes also hand in hand with this education, and now also suddenly it goes hand in hand with operational resilience, right? Because the more people who look at the code, the better it is, right? And coming back maybe to the Explorer, what you will see is we are going to make that 100% open source, and we actually build it in Java. And that means that we're going to get a lot of Java libraries around the corner now.
Which we all need.
Yes, which everybody needs, which will help on the last pillar, which is adoption, right?
Yeah.
So getting more Java libraries means that we now have Java, we have Python, we have Haskell, we have Rust, which basically makes it a lot easier for the variety of developers to basically build up Cardano. Because what we have to always remember is, it's not the technology, it's the people who bet on the technology who's going to make it a success. And that's really why we chose those three things. And that's really exactly what we're doing right now, to ensure that we can really ensure from a regulatory education perspective, people know what they can do with Cardano, not just the banking use cases, but also that people don't start regulating. So if you're building an awesome gaming platform or social media platform, Cardano, but you have to go through a regulated bank, this is not part of it, right? So, and adoption, really enabling adoption, but not being an adopter, if you may say so, right? And last but not least, the operational resilience, right? Because, as more and more people live in Cardano, there will be more and more requests on code updates, more requests, more hard fork units, more hard fork units. Complexity of the code increases. The likelihood of an attack or just bug increases, right? So we need more and more people who can actually read, understand, and verify the code. So that's our.
It was very insightful what you said about, so there's like three things I want to touch on, right? Because that was great. The first thing was liquid staking, and, the difference between Ethereum and, because, Bitcoin and Ethereum are the largest ones that most regulators know about, they're going to make regulation based on how those blockchains work, without looking at Cardano. And Cardano staking is completely different. On Ethereum, if you don't know, if you want to stake your ETH, it's locked until a period where everyone's unlocked, and you have to actually give up the control of the Ethereum to another party unless you have 32 ETH yourself and also know Linux operation and server operation, and you still have fear of slashing. Whereas on Cardano, as we all know, you can send and receive your ADA at any time, even if it's staked. And, that is the definition of liquid staking. And I hadn't really thought about that from a regulation perspective, them focusing on that specifically. And also your goal with Aiken, you mentioned you guys want to, build something where people can write smart contracts, easier on Cardano. You want to open source it so more people start building and more people start developing their own open source software. Well, it's working because, I'm actually, building something called Atrium, and one piece of it is actually written entirely in Aiken, and we're open sourcing the smart contracts that are associated with it. Amazing. So, your goal and intention is actually working. What we're doing is, it's this notion of a user account NFT. Normally, you go to mint an NFT, it's using a centralized server or a smart contract. What we're doing is we're actually allowing users to mint accounts on our platform that stores all of the user data in datums that other smart contracts can read. And we're developing it entirely in Aiken. And we're also going to open source it for everyone to use, where anyone's actually going to be able to, have user accounts built into their Cardano application. So, it's really interesting for me to hear, your goals and intentions with Aiken and it to actually, be happening so soon, and I've heard a lot of good things about Aiken. I speak to the developer community all the time, and they just mention how easy it is to use when you compare it to, Plutarch or Plutus. And yeah, I'm really excited about Aiken, and, congrats to K-Tours for how awesome and easy it is to use. And we're actually going to be launching that, within the next 6 or 7 months. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, we're actually doing a live workshop in 2 days' time here in Denmark. But as part of this event, where we're going to do some live coding, and a big chunk of the team is here to not just explain what it is, but also to show some coding and help people with the boundary conditions, take feedback, encouraging people to participate. And then later, what you've also seen from the Cardano Foundation side is that we beefed up our legal team. So we hired a chief legal officer who's coming directly from the Swiss regulator. He's really amazing. He actually wrote his PhD on multi-party computational systems, right? So he actually has technical understanding, and he's been using his time as trainer basically on looking at a lot of these projects, right? And just after him, we hired another really good lawyer, right? Plus we have then a paralegal, plus we have then a part-time amazing capital markets lawyer. And that also have allowed us to answer more public consultations. So as you probably saw, I was in Brussels, I've been in London, I've been in Singapore and other places, both as witness, but also to engage with the regulators. But we're now also answering public consultations where we see fit. When I say where we see fit is because it's big work, and you have to be very honest. When you write like 20 pages on your view on the future of, data privacy in the European Union, it's only going to be a finite amount of people who's going to read it. So if you don't feel that they're going to like the message, you're saying sometimes it's better not to do it.
Yeah.
But I do think that we could use a little bit of help maybe from the local communities, not the global community, the local communities, to maybe put a bit of pressure on some of those consultations. Mm-hmm. So if you see we're sharing a consultation, for instance, we're going to do one here now for the implementation of MiCAF, the new stablecoin machine under the European Union. And I would expect that we'll be one out of many who's writing ours. But if you're sort of close to Brussels or you have listeners in Europe, it'd be really nice if you're pushing that a little forward so we can make it politicians' agenda. Because do not forget that every country is different. In the European Union, all the people who selected into the European Parliament, right, they stand, accountable towards the voters, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of 2020 that passed the infrastructure bill that essentially stated if you're operating a validator node, but they were focusing on Ethereum specifically, and you process swap transactions, you have to, as a Stakepool operator in the United States, give social security numbers, give their name, their address, their phone number. And that's what we all did. I made a YouTube video a couple of years ago telling everyone, call your congressman, call the Senate. And, I think that they heard that message. And I think, whether you're in Brussels or in the United States, when you do contact your congressman and you have knowledge on this and you speak about how, this benefits your life or your business, I think it does, slowly by slowly actually make a large impact.
Well, what I didn't know, which was new to me, maybe this is, cut me off, this is too much storytelling, right? So I went to the Parliament in the UK to witness in one of those hearings, right? And I spoke to a lot of members of Parliament and House of Lords. And there's actually a rule, I believe is actually about the rule set of United Kingdom, that if you live in a constituency, so if you live in a city and this is your member of Parliament, and you contact that person, he has to show you the Parliament. Now, you might have to wait a couple of weeks or a month, but he has to show the person the Parliament. It's part of his job. So, I was thinking, well, it would be actually great to have a couple of Cardano people to actually do that, right? And take a hold on the member of Parliament and, walk through these, halls of fame and, with all this history. It's a great experience, right? But there you could also sort of, put in the message in there.
Yeah.
Even though I have to say that specifically in the House of Lords, they're very fond of Cardano.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you say that?
Well, there is a couple of people, and I'm not really allowed to mention them here, right? But there's a couple of people who's actually very active in the Cardano community. And it is so when you get over a certain amount of equity in your portfolio, you actually have to declare that. So at least one person has declared a large sum of data, and he's actually been very active in the SIP 1694 discussions, and he actually even participated in Edinburgh. We actually had a member of Parliament in the SIP 1694 a workshop in Edinburgh, which I think again is actually amazing, right? If you think about a blockchain project, and then you have a professional politician who's coming and sharing his experience and giving good advice, and also taking critiques and opinions from our community as being a part of the community, but also being a part. I think this is we're seeing things are changing, right?
Yeah, I remember there being a few politicians at the Wyoming Summit in 2020. Remember we met on the second floor there. I saw at least a few different politicians there.
Yeah,
and back then that was really exciting to me because as much users as we have now and as much excitement as we have now, we really didn't have that back then. So seeing that back then was definitely huge. So I'm curious about centralized bank digital currencies. This was actually a viewer question. Has there been any progress made with jurisdictions about bringing CBDCs to Cardano?
Well, yes and no, right? So IoT is working on a Wyoming coin, right? So there's a project there going forward, which I think could be very, very interesting. There is also a few RFPs who are still outstanding, but it is a difficult topic, right? Because we have to think about what is the purpose of this. Is the purpose more control, or is the purpose that you can give something to the people living in your country which they don't have today, like banking, the unbanked, right? Or because there's actually a lot of people which is unbanked also in the United States and European Union and so on. So it's not just in Africa that people don't have access to capital here and so on. And what we've seen quite often is that a lot of blockchain protocols are very active and want to get in there because this is it's this digital one was already digital, right? So it's actually that's very easy to put it on blockchain.
Yeah.
But the problem we've seen and the reason why we're not engaged so much in these discussions is more of a political question, right? Why are you doing it? And are you really serious about doing it? Because it actually had very large consequences in terms of privacy. It could have very large consequences on the whole corporate banking and the whole banking environment, depending if it's empowering into money. And plus, it has a very, very long lead time that should be in action. Sometimes it has to go through the election and other things. So from a technology stack perspective, there's one or two features which could be argued that we're lacking, but we are definitely scalable. Operational facilities is top-notch, smart contracting, everything is as it should be. And, I would actually do it in native as smart contract, right? So I think from a technology perspective, we're really up there with the best of the best. It's more been, about, who wants to go through that circle of 3 to 5 years time, and then potentially you end up in centralized control. But again, we are an open public business blockchain. It is not me to decide who does that, but I can decide whether I can decide on my partnership team, right? So I can say, for my partnership team, we're trying to look at a framework which is called United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 17 goals in that package. You can then argue, is there a better setup and so on? That doesn't matter so much to me, but what matters to me is that we chose an external framework which is recognized around the world. We try when we, sometimes we can pick a project and sometimes we need to fight for a project. But we really try to have a look at those 17 goals. So it has to tick 2 or 3 boxes before we put human resources or even cash into it. And then the last thing, what it really has to do, it has to escalate and scale the existing community. And what I mean about that is if somebody just wants to do something which is, it's great, right? It's private code. It's not shareable. It doesn't have any benefits. It maybe gives you transactions on the blockchain. The foundation is not the right place to do it. If there is a bit of infrastructure which you really need to do this magical project, if that bit of infrastructure can be made open source, it makes it easier and lower cost for other people to develop and get out, we're definitely a part.
Yeah, I'm glad that you had some reluctance in that. And it's, because of what you mentioned, privacy, control, and the way I've always viewed it is what governments are eventually going to do is they're going to use layer 1s as the security protocol, and they're going to build, layer 2s or side chains that have their own parameters, that allow them to have control and allow them to remove privacy from their, their users, allow them to set up pattern recognition that, sees habits. And, I think it's good to actually have some reluctance on that topic and not just so immediately say, get as many CBDCs on Cardano as possible. I brought this question up to, John O'Connor. I asked him how they really handle that in Africa. And, he mentioned the genocide in Rwanda. And, it was a very, just a moment that gave me goosebumps because he mentioned, how important it is that for them to, not work with governments that, will use that, actual protocol for bad. And I think what you stated about, essentially making it easy for, governments to do so is the way to do it. The same way we're trying to make it easy for developers to come in and develop protocols with Agent. I think a way for people to actually have an easy, way for these regulators to do such a thing would be good in the long term. I just think we're a little bit away from that. Another viewer question that I had was about foundation support for projects. And I think this is another thing that kind of comes with the times. Every 3 or 4 years, everybody's unhappy. And then, for about a year or two, everyone's happy again. So, one thing I've been seeing a lot is, foundation support for projects. Is the foundation, supposed to support projects? A lot of, people will bring up other chains that do. And, I've also seen, IOG has, an investment fund that's investing in projects. I've seen, support from the Cardano Foundation in the past for, things that I've done as well. So I don't know, I think these people are really speaking specifically about monetary support. because I've actually received support in the past as far as, retweets go. And I've had, it's been much easier for me as a community member, a builder, a podcaster to communicate with the Cardano Foundation in the past year and the past 2 years. I think before it was much harder. But, where do you stand on, the foundation support for projects?
Yeah, so if we go back to what I sort of explained earlier, is that the Cardano Foundation is set up by the original founders of Cardano in a complete different way than many other blockchain projects.
Yeah.
So it's not just like 5-6 normal minutes, sorry about that, who sits around the table and they set up this pile of minted tokens, and they basically say, oh, I like this project, I don't like that project, right? So it was always meant that there would be something like Catalyst, or potentially, I think we really break up multiple versions of Catalyst, whereas, each their specialities, right?
Yeah.
And they have access to the decentralized treasury, they have access to the, the reserves as opposed to bring us to the next era of Cardano. More specifically, what we're speaking about is that, and there's some arguments about what the original intent was and what the current is, but how I look at it is there's potentially 3 purposes of the reserves today, and not more than that. The first one is bootstrapping economic activity on top of Cardano. So basically ensuring the startups and others that can explore Cardano, what you can do, and they can get some help to get economically sustainable. And that's really what, in my mind, Catalyst should be doing, right? Or multiple versions of Catalyst. I think that nobody ever said that it could do a new version. The other part is, the operators. The operators, they get, incentivized to keep doing the hard work. And we remember we had a little bump on the chain some months back, right? We had people up at 3 o'clock at night because they had a special alarm from the data center that was ringing and so on, that they start troubleshooting before, most people even got the first cup of coffee, right? So how do you ensure that these operators also exist in the next 5, 10, and 20 years? For most of us today, this is a no-brainer. Of course, it's Cardano, it will exist. But if you look at the distribution of funds today, you have to be aware of that, way above 80% of the money or the rewards supposed to Stakepool operators is actually coming from the reserves. Yeah, that means that there's not enough transaction activity or diversity transaction activity on top of Cardano. And last but not least, the infrastructure, right? So IRG was paid to do the first version of Cardano, right? And hopefully there'll be many versions of Cardano when they sign off that task, right? But will we be in an ecosystem where the value capture is so strong on top of Cardano that people are able to contribute to that build, or will it need a little bit of gasoline? Yeah, from the reserves. I think it would need a little bit of gasoline from the reserves, but I'm not the only one raising my hand yet. So that was sort of the 2+1 ideas about the reserves. And the Cardano Foundation has no control over the reserves, right? Yeah. So none whatsoever. So what we did, we actually got a contribution, so 648 million ADA, right? To basically do what's in our deed to do our mandate. Now we do give grants, right? And we do also give indirect grants. So if you look at what we do in terms of contribution to Stakepool operators, we do delegation to them, right? So we focus on decentralization, right? So we're focusing on single Stakepools, relatively small, ensuring that they got bootstrapped by, like a delegation from the foundation. And then the second iteration was we're focusing really on Stakepool operators who's contributing either as a contributor, like what you do, right? Or with code or with an application, something like that. So we do these delegations, which is an indirect contribution. And I say indirect, right? Because it's if you would delegate towards maximum financial gain, right? Well, we could do that, right? Yeah. I mean, we see other entities doing that, and they're happy. Everybody's happy, right? But we think that right now there's still a Stakepool operators who do a lot for the community. That's why we've done it like that. And besides that, we do actually give some grants. We don't really we've taken one equity position way before my time. We do give some grants. It's been very rare for the last long time. I think the reason why it's been rare is that most people who's been contacting us, we started to work with other foundations, and we noticed that people are foundation showing, all of them team coming in, doing it on social media, but they're just leaving Solana, or they're just leaving somewhere else, right? They're expecting to get a grant, but they're so used to that it's the foundation who controls all of that, so they come knocking on our door. It's bad that we do some information sharing and work together with others now, right?
No.
The other part is that very often they say, yeah, but I just need this, not equity investment, and then I'll be filthy rich because I solved this amazing problem, right? And like, yeah, what about the rest of the community? What gives me the right to choose you over all the other cool projects? I mean, that's why we have Catalyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a huge community, thousands and thousands who evaluate, discuss.
Yeah, $16 million this time around, Fund 10.
Yeah. And last but not least, when we do with brands is mainly around infrastructure. So if somebody says, I have this cool project, but I need a bespoke API to do something, well, then, talk to us, right? So I don't know if you've seen, we're actually taking over the address tier team. I don't know if you've heard that. Yeah, so we're taking over the address tier team from IoT. So the address tier team is a set of applications which a lot of people in the community rely on. So it's basically DB Sync, is Rosetta, is GraphQL, and then there's a REST API which is sort of retired, plus just the backend wallet. And that obviously brings an extended amount of cost to us, but it also allows IoT to focus on the actual protocol, because it's connected to the protocol, but it's not the actual protocol.
Yeah.
Plus, it allows us to have a second entity who's doing something in the ecosystem, and we can then move that towards true open source, in terms of we're anyway having the contact to many of the exchanges, many of the banks, and many of the large sort of applications who's using that. So we can start sort of putting that more into the open source mindset, where people can contribute to the source code and the social systems that actually between, only the GitHub repository. Unfortunately, it also takes, it's quite a lot of overhead for us, right? And it costs some money to run something with us that the whole system relies on. But as you've probably seen on GitHub, there's not been, it could have been given a little bit more attention, but I think what was more important was that the actual blockchain got attention.
So yeah, we've all moved away from DB Sync, and we're using BlockFrost now, and it would be amazing if it kind of got a jump start.
Yeah, and we don't want to compete with BlockFrost, right? But what it does do is it allows us to do something very special. So when we're sort of looking at DB Sync, when we looked at re-engineering that to be to create something faster, and then we looked at the Explorer, right? What we found out, for instance, is that the reward calculation is not as simple as it might seem. There's a reason why many of the Explorers who doesn't work with DB Sync don't have the right reward calculation, right?
Yeah.
So that allows us actually to start documenting that. Mm-hmm. And what you will see coming out of this is hopefully better documentation for the foundation, faster tooling for implementation on Cardano. So we're not talking about the blockchain. IoT is super well suited and very strongly and deploying very strongly, right? Yeah. But if we can help them to focus on actually the actual hash code, right? I think what it will do is it will create more decentralization. It will create, more people to pick up the phone, pick up the channels, and receive contributions in terms of feedback, but also start receiving code feedback. Plus, we anyway, as I said, we work with many of these entities who are using WhatsApp funds and so on. Right? We can start saying, yeah, why don't you write the code so you have it like you want it, right? But what I would like to see is I would like to see, the delegation outside the Stakepool, with the community that Stakepool, that would be really nice, or other things like that, right? So multi-delegation, we'll see, it's a lot of good stuff there we start influencing. But that's one of the reasons why we hired engineers, is because we needed a better understand the actual blockchain to understand what we're dealing with, but we also needed a way to contribute back to it.
Yeah, I've actually been working on solving the multi-delegation problem myself. I'll tell you a little bit after the podcast.
Yeah.
My last question for you was USDC on Cardano. A few months ago, there was a little bit of the community. They were saying, the foundation kind of denied the request. It was a large request of sums to Circle for having USDC on Cardano. So I kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think it's better for us to kind of come out with our own stable coins, and not use Circle, or, was the fee just kind of too high where we're at now, or were we missing kind of, features necessary for USDC on Cardano?
I'm just looking a little bit out in the air because I'm thinking if there's an NDA around this, but I don't think so.
If there is, we can cut it out. No worries there.
So we've been in contact with USDC, obviously, because it's the largest stablecoin since I basically arrived, right? Mm-hmm. And what we see is, USDC has been doing tremendously well, So having USDC and Cardano, or having any really big stablecoin Cardano, which is sort of either from an adoption perspective big or from a regulatory perspective, ticks all the boxes. I think this would be a must. We need that.
Yeah.
Now, many of these stablecoin projects, they live on something we call integration fees. So what we did was we basically, we took contact to them. We asked an integration fee, right? So it's double-digit millions. And then we looked at the on-chain activity for other blockchain protocols who paid that. And what we saw was we didn't see a tremendous spike in the activity after the USDC implementation.
Right.
So then we basically, I was actually surprised. I was expecting the spike in the transactions. And then we basically said, can you break down the cost? Because it's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What am I getting here?
Yeah. And they couldn't or wouldn't, right? They basically say, I can break it down, but what you will see is that there's a big premium for us. So this is what I was like, okay, then I'm not the right guy, because how should I, say that, what's been entrusted to us to ensure that Cardano exists in 10, 20, 30 years, that I spent a tremendous amount of that based on something where I can't verify the actual value in on-chain data. And, I'm paying somebody, millions without actually being able to sort of verify that it's millions worth of work. So that's where we stood. And then I saw that there were some people in the community who said, we should ask Catalyst, we should do a joint proposal in Catalyst to get this over the line. And I actually thought that was not too bad an idea, to be honest, right? Because then, the community has decided.
Yeah.
And where I stand is a little bit differently. I stand in a place where I have to be accountable towards the supervision, so the board and the supervisory authorities, is foundation regulator, if I may say so. And also, of course, has to be responsible to the actions I do towards not just the community today, but the community we will have in 5, 10, and 20 years, right? That's where I was solving quite heavily. I think maybe it's better we have our own way. But that being said, I think we really, really need, if I had my choice, sorry about this, I'm American now, right? If I had my choice, I would love to have a dollar denominated, a euro denominated, a Swiss franc denominated, European issued stablecoin. Why am I saying that? Well, because of Nika and the implementations of Nika, it's not very sure that USDC would actually be able to be traded in the European Union due to the Nika cases. And so if we could get a European issuer, that would be awesome, because a European issuer would probably also tick all the boxes in the US, but the others, it doesn't work. But we do need a stablecoin, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That's really what I use Ethereum for at this point. If I actually want to have, USD on the blockchain, that's my ETH wallet. So I do think that we need it. And, Jet hasn't been around long enough. The kind of over collateralized assets kind of worry me a little bit, when it comes to, buying those. So, when we did our podcast 2 years ago, it might have been 2.5 years ago, kind of the message that I got was that, things are changing around here. Things are changing at the Cardano Foundation. And, that's what I've seen, after this podcast and after seeing what you guys have done in the past couple of years. I'm really excited for the future of the Cardano Foundation, and consequently the future of Cardano, now that, not only are there, a huge amount of entities all building, open source code and developing on Cardano now. The Cardano Foundation has developers, and you guys have done Aiken and the Explorer, and, we have IOG. And, I think that, we're kind of coming to a really good place. And, I've said this on Twitter recently, I think Cardano is really in the best place that it's ever been. So, thank you so much for doing this podcast. Is there any, closing words that you'd like to say before we head out of here?
Maybe just a shout out to the Cardano Summit in Dubai. Dubai is, of course, not, let's say, the Cardano community's home space. Yeah, Dubai in the last couple of years has really been a mecca for blockchain, AI, DLT, NPC, and stuff like that. And they've really been, as a reason why we chose that. And that last year, what we wanted to do is really wanted to celebrate Cardano, but we also wanted to create a place for workshops and doing deal making and so on. And what we really want to do with Dubai now is we want to anchor into the local community in Dubai. And that means also bringing liquidity providers who's not normally investing in Cardano to the Dubai office. We want to bring local businesses who's doing things or considering doing things, because the Dubai and the UAE governments are very pro blockchain, so they're very encouraging and giving a lot of funding for blockchain-based projects. We want to bring them into the room together with the Cardano community. And of course, we want to celebrate the Cardano community. So I think, if your listeners hasn't been aware yet, we're doing the summit in Dubai. It's going to be in November. There's a very large blockchain summit just before us. So there's going to be a lot of different chains and a lot of different activities going on.
In the same area in Dubai?
Yeah, I think it's about a half, maybe 20 minutes.
I was planning on going for the summit for sure, but I didn't know about that. Maybe I'll have to come a little earlier.
Yeah, I think it might be worth it maybe to come a day or two early.
Yeah, I like multi-chain conferences. I like kind of learning what other communities are building and working on. With the Cardano Summit right afterwards, it just makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does, right? So I just want to give a shout out for the Dubai Summit. I think it's it's always hard for us to do. We didn't want to be an event organizer, right? And we chosen to do it in a separate location than last year, right? Which means that we need to learn the ropes of the building and the local catering and all those things. What's important is that Dubai and UAE, there's a lot of things happening on blockchain, right? There's a lot of assets congregating. There's a lot of smart brains that have the opportunity to do deal making and other things, right? So check out the Cardano Summit website, and if you're in doubt, then reach out to the Cardano community and ask if it's worth coming. I truly believe it is.
Well, the summit last year was worth coming, and I'll make sure I have all of the links for anything the Cardano Foundation is working on, the summit in Dubai, Aiken, their new Explorer, etc. It's all going to be down below. If you guys enjoyed the video and you actually made it till the end, let's comment Rocky Mountains down below. That'll let us know you made it till the end. And thank you guys so much for doing so, and have a good day. See you guys.